All right, as you can see, we now have our application all set up here. I've added a little bit more to this label up here, basically trying to explain a little bit about what is going on. And now if we just come down, we can actually click on this button, we can double click it, or we can come down here and say on click, and we can click this little these little two arrows over here. So either way, it will actually create an event. So that event is going to happen on the code side. Okay, so over here, and just like all things, we want to do our three things. First, we want to get our input, and then we want to do our algorithm, and then we want to have our output. Okay, so for our input, we're going to just grab and create those four variables, right? So if we go back to our design view, our first variable will be number of periods. So we can just say period count is equal to, and then we're going to use self dot, and if we come back over to the design view, we can click on this. This is where that's going to be, and it's called number of periods text box. So we come back over here and we say number of periods text box, and what property do we want of that? We want the text property. Okay, now we probably want that to be some sort of instead of text, we want it to be an int. So we just would come over here and say int and turn that into an integer. Okay, and we'll do the same thing for the next variable. So the next variable is starting amount, and it is starting amount text box. So we come over here and we can say starting amount is equal to, and this one could be not necessarily an int. It could be a decimal, so we'll use float, and we want the text portion of that also. And then the next one, let's click on it, interest rate per month, and it's interest rate text box. So here we'll just call it interest rate is equal to, again, we'll just do float in case it's got a decimal, self dot interest rate dot text. And finally, we will do the last one, which is the monthly deposits. So we'll call it deposits is equal to float self dot, and we'll call it deposit payment dot text. Okay, so that's how we get all of our inputs, and we can test that by coming down here, and we can just say something like print f our payment period is, and then period count, comma, our starting amount is start amount, and our interest rate is, and then finish that with interest rate. And let's just run that. We don't need to do the deposit one, but let's just run that. So we click up here, click run, and then we simply just put in our periods. So we can say something like, if we use this example up here, we'll say 36, 2000, and periodic deposit or interest rate is 5%, and click calculate, and could not convert string to float. If we look on line here, it actually there wasn't anything actually in this, right? So we'll have to run like an if statement for that. We need to actually put a deposit in there, so it'll actually be used. Let's run it, and let's do 36, starting amount 2000, 5% interest, and $100 a month. Calculate, and notice over here our output. Okay, our payment period is 36, our starting amount is 2000, and our interest rate is 5. Let's go ahead and hit stop, and let's do a couple things. Let's come up to our design view, and over here under interest rate, we can add a little label, and in the text, we can do something like that, and maybe increase the size. Let's just call the font size like 15, maybe 18. Make it just a little bit bigger so we'll know that it needs to be as a percent. Okay, and then if we run it, we can see that. And so we just have this output over here when we do our outputs. Pretty much that's it. And now what we can do is when we do our calculate, we'll run our algorithm right here, and that will be in the next video. And then we can do a couple other things like down here in our output, instead of outputting to the output, we can come down and add a output down here. So we can just grab a label and put a label here, and inside that label we can just call it output. And I always like adding a little bit of what it actually is. So in our code down here, instead of print, we could say self.output.text is equal to, and get rid of the curly brackets, and we can just do the F. I always like doing the F string right here. We can just do F string, and it just puts it right in. So let's run it and do our calculation. So 36, 2000, 5, and 100, and click calculate, and it will pop up down here. So we can do a couple other things with that. We can come back over to our design view. We can grab that output. We can look at it and say, hey, let's make that a little bit bigger. And let's go ahead and make that red. So foreground color is red. Okay. And now when we run it, and let's do that again, 36, 2000, 5, and 100, and click calculate. Now it's a little bit bigger, and we can keep working on our formatting to make this bigger and bigger. And we could also do the formatting inside the code also. So inside our code, we can set the formatting here. We could say if it was within a certain range, set the foreground color to red, otherwise set the foreground color to green, something like that. That's something we can do there too.